especially excited for this because we have quite a relationship build up previous to this podcast, which is so wonderful and which we will share about, I am sure. But before we do, welcome deeply, my dear. I am so happy to have you here. And I'm so excited for our conversation and what's coming up. And I want you, for first, I would love to have you introduce yourself to however much you feel called to share about you and your work.
Hi, and it's a pleasure to come on your podcast and to meet you. And as you know, it was a bit of synchronicity, and we sort of joined soul. So yeah, thank you very much for asking me on this podcast. I do a lot, okay, but to sort of put it into a nutshell, I'm a regression trauma therapist, and how I probably started this was. I worked in hospitals. I have got BSc medical honors in dietetics. So I worked a lot in sort of ICUs, trauma, and then I was head at a burns unit, which really put me into how the trauma actually works. So from there, I just knew there was something, I was looking at the families that were going through the trauma and then the actual patients, and I was just going, there's just no aftermath. There's no help for anyone that is going through anything, whether it's in hospital or not. So from then, I sort of wended my way, and I felt there was something more to talk therapy. And then I started going into sort of the healing side and how the body works. And generally, then I would sort of tutors that popped up into my awareness. And as stubborn as I am, because I am stubborn, they had to sort of pop up a few times before I sort of took the lead. But it's been a beautiful journey. So I did a lot of healing courses, and eventually did past life courses, LBL courses, which is life between lives, and then sort of just shot through. Things started happening in my sessions where I started realizing what was actually happening to people's energy, and then started putting my own sort of course in together and helping people from an energetic point of view with the trauma and the blocks that were formed in the body. Yeah. So,
wow.
So from that point of view, what I then put together, which is actually flowing quite nicely, you'll see it a lot in today's line of therapy, which is very awesome because we need to get it out there because it does help people, shift to the depth of that talk therapy cannot do.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that talk therapy isn't part of it. It is part of it, but we need to realize that, our head is only a very small part of the rest of our body. So 90% of our trauma actually is in the body. So then I started doing what we call embedded hypnosis to move cellular body trauma. So that is what we do as a trauma regression therapist now.
I love that very much because I think our society is so caught up in the head still. I feel there's a shift, but most of what we call humans on Earth are mostly up here. And there's a children's book that I've read to my son that goes into a future version of humanity where they're the people who are like the belly people who are living from like their belly up, and then their most population is only the head people. I have like these really big heads and these really tiny bodies, and that's what I was having as a picture when you said that, because I think we have put so much weight on the brain, the logical, which is not wrong, but kind of forgotten that there is also the rest of this wonderful system. And as you said, it's not just the trauma that is in the head, it's not just the mental overload, but there is the physical part. And we still are collectively, and in like the classical treatments, we are definitely not there to invite all parts of us in when it comes to healing from trauma or even from like minor issues. So I totally agree. It's often sad to see how people are treated in like one tiny percentage of their challenge, and the rest is forgotten, left up to to them to like solve out, or most times it just put under the rug?
Yeah. I mean, the head has a lot to play with it, because we have a conscious brain and a subconscious brain. So from that point of view, what the subconscious brain basically does is it keeps any memory or experience or situation. That's our computer default. Now, it will then form aspects of how we perceived that trauma, okay, at that specific age and at that specific time. So it then allows specific hormones to then flow into the body when we are actually then going through something very similar. And there's a back sort of understanding in the body that once you are not in a safe space to actually release that trauma, the body will hold that emotion. Because most of us in a traumatic situation, if we haven't got the support and allowed to release that emotion, okay, the body will hold it because it has to release it at some point. Okay. But if you're not taught that, how does the body actually do it? Because most people think, well, we know what sad is, we know what angry is, we know what any type like that, but we don't. We actually have to, if you think about it, your parents or your caregivers are the ones that actually teach you those emotions. So if they are emotionally immature in some aspect, you don't get taught it. So then how do you actually recognize that emotion in the body? People say, oh, we'll just let that emotion go. But if you don't understand or know that emotion that is caught in the body, how can you just let it go in any circumstance?
I feel like
that's the big problem.
Sorry, it's lagging. Please go on.
So as I was saying, that's the emotion that actually then gets caught in our auric field, because we've got an energetic field who is actually us. So your energetic field is Anna, and your physical body, you just came into this earth to walk around on the earth with, all right? So it's not in essence who you are, it's who you your physical aspect of how we look at you and say, okay, that's Anna. Okay. So from that point of view, your frequency is whatever your soul frequency was as born as, and that is like a fingerprint. No one has that soul print. No one will ever have that soul print. That's what makes you individual. And everyone thinks that's where the whole aspect of, oh, that person's trauma is worse than mine, so I shouldn't complain. All right. But it's differentiated from the fact that your soul frequency is different to everyone else. So every single bit of trauma you have will affect every single person differently. And that's what we've got to understand, is sometimes when we see, I just bumped my toe and it's not a problem, but then the other person will completely fall to the ground and it'll take them days to get over that. That is because of their soul frequency that they've become into the lifetime that they are in at the moment. And it's not from a perspective that they are weaker or stronger. Okay. It's just a frequency that our soul resonates at. And we all know that when you listen to certain music, sometimes you okay, and some people are fine with it. That is what I'm talking about. Okay. And it's, again, I say, it's not making someone weaker or stronger at a personal level. It's just your soul frequency. Okay.
I feel often we are so quick to judge other people. Like the example with the toe. Like you said, for one person it's nothing, and for the other one it's like really big drama that goes on for maybe days or weeks. And maybe I don't want to like blame society or how we've been raised, but I see it in a lot of people that there's the comparison in a judgmental way, and not the comparison between like me today and me yesterday. That I think can be a healthy comparison if you want to go into that. But comparing myself to someone else who, like you said, is a complete different frequency, has complete different ways to process or things, how they think, and perspectives and ways of behavior, it's just not making sense. But that's what most of us are doing. It's like, oh, well, she should get over it. What is that? And therefore,
Exactly.
I feel like we are kind of learning to not cope, but to shut up, or to try to behave like the other one who we think like behaved right. And so we don't make a drama out of hurting our toe next time. And that sounds so like little, but then again, it's not. For me, that was like when for the listeners, Janet gifted me a wonderful regression therapy about 2 weeks ago. And I will share more about that later. But what really hit me was when you brought up that exact example about hitting my toe, and kind of a soul fragment leaving if I don't know or do kind of take it back in this moment, to say, like, maybe put my hand over my toe or give myself the care that I need in that moment to make myself whole again, in a way. And most of us are not taught that, and we then kind of leave parts of ourselves somewhere out there. And I was like visually seeing this while you talked, and I was like, oh my God, that's why that's so dramatic for some people. And from the outside, you think like, you just hurt your toe, what is it? But we don't get the immense drama that could happen out of that, like, little quote unquote thing. And so we do judge, and the other person recognizes it, and then maybe next time they think like, oh, well, I've overreacted, I shouldn't do that, they've looked at me kind of strange, so next time I hit my toe, I better shut up and do as if nothing had happened. And then, like, if you think about that, how many times do you hurt yourself in these like minor ways? How many pieces or parts of your energetic blueprint are kind of swirling around on earth, not put back to you? And that was what I was chewing on for the last 2 weeks. I was like, my God, is that big? And it's like, when you think about animals, I feel they have more of this instinct still left in them to say, like, if there's a shock, an animal normally shakes it out. They have ways to intuitively process trauma differently than we. And maybe we should look more to the animal kingdom to find our way to process it, if our caregivers are not able to tell us the healthy way. And I would love to know who is. But I feel like there's definitely a disconnect in the way we treat ourselves, and we hold the consciousness that we are able to heal ourselves, or to kind of call back these parts, because we can. But there's kind of a not remembering of all of the power that we have with these little tiny behaviors that we can do or not do.
I think you brought up a very good point there, and it's from generations that we've actually then been taught and untaught stuff, all right? And it's from a coping mechanism. You can't, you can imagine when, our sort of ancestors were in war or anything like that, they couldn't exactly then fall apart and say, I'm feeling X, Y, and Z, because the survival mode had to come in, because they were either going to be killed in war or something to that effect. Okay. So what then did happen is that we then closed down that aspect of we can release, because you couldn't in the middle of a battlefield. Okay.
Of course.
Now, from the point of view of whether it's a battlefield, okay, in 1814, or whether it's a battlefield in your home or a partnership or whatever, it's still, to the body, it doesn't discern. It's just a battlefield that's happening in front of you. You are in it. And we have to realize that the body is very, very physiological. It is the heartbeats, the lungs do this, the hormones that are meant to come in when you're in survival mode, they all come in. They cannot be stopped. It just works like a body. So basically, this is our robot, and it's just going to function how it was made to function. Okay. Now, from that point of view, we get to the point where most people say, oh, but you know what? It just happens. We just release it. No, we don't. Because from a human perspective, we've been taught not to. So we have to go back to that aspect where we need to learn how we learned that not to, basically. Okay. And it's very fundamental from a body point of view, because as I said, you are this energy inside the body, and it's your aura. If anyone doesn't know about auras, it's the energetic field that you actually then project out of your physical body. And most of us know that if you're standing in a line and there's a few people behind you and you think, oh, okay,
Mhm.
I want to move up this line, I'm feeling a little bit sort of caught in that line, but you look back and you see that they're not standing close. What your aura does is actually going, it's about 6 to 8 meters out, depending on how you are feeling on that day. So the two, their aura is doing the same, and you both are basically touching each other's auras, and from an energetic point of view, and we are telepathically then conveying what energy is inside our body, even though the person is like, oh, smiling and whatever. That's why we say, we're fine. No, you're not really.
Mhm.
I know from an energetic point of view, you're not. But then the person is smiling. So the brain's going, but I'm getting what they're not. And the brain is then seeing that the person's smiling and saying that they're fine. So it confuses the brain. Okay. So we already then, that's where the aspect of how we started to mask what we were feeling, because it was easier in the social circles to just say I'm fine than actually start blurbing out. And
Mhm.
how many people are going to listen to that anyway? And then you sort of labeled the victim. But basically what happens is you've actually got to do that in order to release um, certain emotions in the body. So what, if the body knows exactly what to do, we've just stopped it from doing that, okay, through, because we didn't, as I say, have that support
Mhm.
around us, or just because, it was an aspect that we've told is not so bad. Okay. And as I said, from that frequency level, it is different to every single person. So, with this energetic layer that we have around us, if any trauma, and that's where the problem lies, is that people think they look for the worst trauma that they've ever been through, and they go to someone and say, this was my worst trauma, I want to sort it out. But what's actually happened, that is an energy line of something that we would, as an adult now, go, sure, that was so tiny, but that was the root cause
Mhm.
of what then ended up to be a massive trauma, because your emotions from that tiny little episode or experience or situation was lying in your body. And it's the body then goes, well, you felt sad that one time, you didn't release it. It's a frequency that's going to actually destroy my body. That's how we get disease in the body. So it comes closer and closer to the body, and what actually happens is the body wants to repel it, because it knows it's not the right frequency for you. Okay, and that's what we call lower vibrational frequency emotions. Then joy and everything is a higher vibration. But that, what we have to understand is emotions are emotions. You can't get hot water and cold water separately. They are just a degree of a temperature.
Mhm.
Okay, all right. So your emotions are just a degree of what is happening to you at that present moment. Okay. So everyone, you can't you can't not feel angry and then feel joy, because the fact is that they're part of the same emotion, just different degrees. Okay, so everyone says,
Yeah.
no, you can't feel those horrible emotions. No, you have to, because it's part of how emotions are felt. Okay, so that if we take that emotion that I was talking about, the sadness comes into the body, say, you were left at school and mom didn't pick you up, and you didn't understand, because generally at that time, you don't know that moms and dads are running around the traffic, the whatever. All you felt was sad because they didn't pick you up at the right time. So you jump into the car and you just feel, okay, that's not a problem. What you should actually, the mother or father should say is, how are you? I'm late. Sorry. And you can't do that 24/7 as a mom or dad. So we have to look at it from a point of view that that's how we learn about emotions, is to actually go into
Mhm.
situations. All right. Because you can't, I mean, if you're kept in a box, you can't learn how to live, okay, in the real world, because
Yeah.
things are happening in the real world. It's not going to not happen. Okay. So what happens is that emotion, which is a frequency of sadness, comes into the body. and your aura is actually split. Okay. Now, as you were talking about that toe, we understand that if we hurt ourselves, we say ow,
Mhm.
and depending on how sore that toe is, we can swear really hard, okay, because it wasn't really our one. Okay. Um, or else we just go, oh, and there's what your body's telling you. This is the frequency that actually was hit at the toe. Um, and then you will grab it. So what happens is that energy is energy. If you give it a force, so if I throw a tennis ball over there, I'm exerting a force, and once the tennis ball energy that I threw it with finishes, it just drops and stays there. So
Mm.
someone has to give the same energy force and throw that tennis ball back to me in order to get it back to me. Now, energy, that's just physics. Okay, it's not just no weird stuff. It's physics. If you apply energy to energy, it'll move
Yeah.
until there is none left. Okay. So what happens is you applying a force when you hit your toe on a step, and that energy is around you. So it has to break through you, okay,
Mhm.
before it hits your physical body. And that's where people, I think, get a bit confused, is that we are not our body, yet we are. It is, you are your energy that's far, as I say, quite a few meters
Mm.
outside of you, that is also going to then be torn, which is actually you. So what happens is you then split the energy equal and opposite reaction. It then lies on the stoop, but you body knows already, you usually grab it at the force that you've hit the
Mhm.
stoop with, okay, or the step. So you bring it back and you close the toe like that. So you're actually closing off and bringing that piece of energy, or some people call it a soul part, back into and closing that gap off. Now you can imagine if you didn't do that, that piece of energy cannot come back to you.
Yeah.
It can't just get up and walk back to you. So it's going to lie there. So if you hit your foot when you were 3 and now you're 63, it's still lying on the step, because no one is actually, it sounds weird, but
But it's like that.
from a physics, it's
Yeah.
exactly what happens. It's not
Yeah.
anything weird that you're trying to think up. It's physics. All right. So this is what happens. And there's 5 aspects of trauma that's at a frequency that can damage our energy. And that's emotional, verbal, mental, physical, and sexual. So that the body doesn't demarcate it as this is worse trauma than that.
Mhm.
It just says it's trauma. Okay. But obviously, for legalities, we have to then demarcate it. But remember, we're talking to a body that's not legal. It doesn't work like a
No.
lawyer. It just works like a body.
Yeah.
Okay. So from that perspective, every time someone says something to you and it actually tears your aura, you actually leave a split there. And most of us, all right, with elders and people who we deem are, you got authority above us, we don't actually say or do what we should actually have said or
Mhm.
did or should have done at that situation where we felt that emotion. So then, as like the example with a toe, that energy then just lies wherever the situation occurred. Now you can imagine throughout the whole lifetime, and you can have many, many tears in your aura. So what actually happens is that you're leaking your energy. Now, this energy that I'm talking around your body is the only thing that actually heals this physical body. Okay. So if you're leaking, all right, so basically I'm pulling the plug out, all right, and
Mm.
you're just going into um, the surroundings, all right, your aura then starts to close down because it's leaking. It's like a puncture.
Yeah.
Okay, you can put in as much air in your tire until you fix that puncture. Okay, and what actually happens is that your aura then comes closer and closer to the body, and it's called, so if you look at it, we were born with a 6 meter, we're now at a
Mhm.
2 meter, which is very close to our body. The actual body then just goes into what we call fight, flight, or freeze, because the body's only worried about survival. It doesn't worry about what you're wearing. It doesn't worry about nothing else. I just need to survive. Okay. So then all those hormones that are going to come in and damage the body, okay, then pour in, because of the fact that your body actually knows that you're actually leaving. It is, if you want to be like completely straight, you're actually passing because
Mhm.
you are leaving your physical body. Okay. So what happens is that the aura gets very close to the body, okay, and it won't heal the body because all it is doing survival. It's just enough energy for me to actually live. Now, as I said, we're getting then depressed aura, which is exactly what depression is. Okay, so the body's
Mhm.
going to say, "You sit on your butt now and you're going to do nothing." Okay, because I haven't got enough energy to run around and do things and heal my body. So I've actually got to make you do what I need you to do to heal. Okay, but what do? We say to everyone who's depressed, please get up, go play sport, do it. They can't. Okay, so they
Mhm.
feel even worse and a failure because they can't, but they actually don't have enough energy in their body to do that. So it's a vicious cycle from the fact
Yeah.
that, you know, we're telling someone to do something and they can't because the body cannot. It's physically impossible to do that. Okay. It's like if you're trying to put I'm not a electrician, so a 12 volt into a 2 volt or whatever, it's not going to work. Okay. There's not enough energy to go through. Right. So what actually happens is that the body then will start to break down physically because it's keep that energy is just keeping you alive, okay, in survival mode. And that's what survival mode is. I'm keeping you
Mm.
alive for a reason. Okay. And the amount of energy or holes or tears in your auric system, you have to now actually look at and close in order to actually then gain your energy back
Yeah.
into the full extent of what you were born as. Okay. And that's why we say when we've had not such a nice experience, I feel shattered. The
Mhm.
subconscious mind will actually tell you, okay, exactly what's happening, but we don't listen, even to ourselves, even to the words we're saying. Okay. The body's going, I'm telling you what's wrong, and you're still not listening.
Oh.
Okay.
The
So basically, what the body does is it then puts you into a go slow, that because
Mhm.
it has to. All right.
Yeah.
Um, but on the other aspect is that because our body's a physiological aspect and it works as it works, all your adrenaline, your cortisol, all your damaging hormones are then released from the subconscious mind because you're in survival. Okay. And then it then destroys the gut lining where our dopamine, which is our happy drug, okay, or happy
Mhm.
hormone, as it calls it, all right, is actually then produced. So it cannot be produced in the gut because you can imagine you can't be in survival mode, okay, and be happy. Okay, we can outwardly, all
Yeah.
right, but the body is in that survival mode. So it is only going to bring in. So what happens is that the dopamine shuts off. Okay. That's why we say, I can't feel joy. I can't feel
Mhm.
happy. Because if you're in fear, fight, flight, or freeze, whatever is the emotion that is linked to that, the body can't turn on the opposite, love, joy, because it doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Um, so those emotions need to be released. And as I say, we need to, what the main thing now we're finding, okay, is that yes, we can release through a lot of methods like talk therapy and TRE, which is that shaking. But what the
Mhm.
brain actually has to do is find out where this trauma came from so we can understand it because we've got a conscious brain. Unfortunately, um, you know, it's a good and it's a bad thing when we say we've got a conscious brain. We're trying to think why. Sometimes it's not the best to get why. Okay. And we know from when we were tiny, we popped out of mom's womb and we started asking why. You know, we all know
Mm.
as mothers, our children, oh, why? Don't stop asking me why. Okay.
Mhm.
Uh, and we don't stop asking why. We always want to know because that's how we then actually understand the puzzle of what's actually happening to us. Okay. So, from a very deep level, because we now at a cellular level, we then take the person back to that situation of the trauma, and we allow the body to do what actually they should have done then. All right. So it doesn't matter what whether they were meant to shout, scream, kick, whatever their body felt like that they should have done then. Okay. That is what we elicit in the body. And it's actually amazing. The body will just do it. As long as you ask it to do something, okay, the body will follow through. As long as you're not in a safe space, you would have to be in a safe space in order to do that. Okay. So the brain will bring up a situation. We actually then look for the emotion that is stuck in the body. And that might feel heavy. It might feel tingly, hot. It depends on every person's very different. Okay. But what the body's trying to tell you is look at that part of your body that you are feeling tension in or anything like that. And then we then root it back to the first time that you felt that tension. Because remember, when we come in as a child, and everyone thinks it's weird, but we have no clue what emotions are. We have to be taught everything. We have to be taught sadness. We have to be taught angry. We have to be taught joy. We have to be taught love. Every one of those emotions has to be taught to us. Now, if they're not, how does the body know how to release that? Can't. Okay, but it's there. It's the frequency is there. Okay. So that's why we then take the person back is what we then, because most of the clients that I deal with, they actually can't even say the emotion because they don't know it. So how do you release it when you don't even know the emotion? So once we take the person back into that situation that caused whatever emotion, sadness, angry, whatever, they actually start to realize, because they are working from an adult perspective now, but their emotions will be at that age that they had the trauma at. And that's what's confusing, because when we go to talk therapy, we're talking to the person as an adult. But the body is actually relating it at the time of that incident at that age. Okay. So you'll find that if we talk to the person to that age, 5 years old, 6, 10, 12, whatever, we then allow that emotion to actually surface easier.
Yeah.
Okay. And then we then release it with body work, which helps. And you'll find that little soul piece, you'll ask it, okay, that energy, once we've sort of cleared the situation and done what you should have done, actually, it just starts to come back. It knows exactly where it needs to go in the body. And it's weird. Sometimes it's on top of the toe, sometimes left ear. It's weird. The body knows exactly where that soul piece needs to go in and close. Okay. And what's nice about this therapy is that it's actually such a deep level that the root cause is generally where you first felt that emotion for the first time and couldn't release it for whatever reason. But as I said, the body then attracts the next situation, but it'll be 2 times as whatever that emotion was. Because once you felt emotion, you sort of, it's okay. I felt that before. It's not a problem. I can deal with this. Okay. So the body will bring a situation that's times 2 sadness. You then put it into Pandora's box and go, no, I'm just going to put it into my subconscious mind and I'll just leave it there. It's fine. Okay. All right. Then the body goes, no, I'm going to bring you the 3rd situation, the 6th situation. And it just gets bigger. And you thinking, why is my life flowing and crumbling and like I'm healing, but I don't know what to do. Okay. Because it's an energy line that is still in the body and it's relating. So as humans, and it's a good thing or a bad thing, I'm not too sure, maybe a bad thing, aspect of us is that we then just go, it's okay, I'm just going to put it in Pandora's, and we're not realizing that that is what is actually changing your destiny, because it's what we call triggers. So people in the situations will come towards us because we're attracting that, because that's what our aura is actually resonating. Okay, so if you're resonating sadness, more situations of sadness will come in because your body's saying, listen, acknowledge what you're not moving, so that you can move it. Your body can release it and do what it's meant to do. And that's where the triggers come in, and they're if I can say, they're the horriblest things on earth. And it's at a subconscious level. So until you go through a body work and you realize what triggers are, there's no ways you can actually pick up those triggers. And what I'm saying is that a trigger is, say, for instance, and hopefully I'm not sort of triggering anyone on the podcast, is if they are bullied at school, which I'm sure I'll trigger many people, okay, our senses actually take in the most strongest aspect of a situation at that time. Now, we've got 8 senses, remember, so it can be smell, it can be sight, it can be noise, it can be the way the person's standing, it can be anything. So triggers are very difficult to pick up, okay, if you're just trying to do it by yourself. And what happens is that if the bully, will just say, was wearing a red t-shirt, okay, and that was the most prominent thing that we picked up, your brain actually doesn't look at the person. It actually looks at that aspect that was the most profound thing that was happening at that time. So if it was the red t-shirt or the color, you then attach that emotion of whichever is the fight, flight, or freeze emotion, okay, at that time, and it attaches it to that red t-shirt. That's what we call a trigger. Now, how a trigger works is that your brain puts that red t-shirt in the back of your mind. So every time you see a red t-shirt, your body will elicit exactly the same emotion you felt at that time. Now, everyone's going to say, well, no, really? Okay. But think about it. If I say to you, think about a lemon, okay, what happens?
You think about the lemon. Can't help it.
All right. Now, everyone will get a different aspect, but when you first experienced a lemon, or you first experienced ice cream, or you first experienced anything, okay, the strongest aspect you remember, and for you, it was sight, okay?
Yeah.
So you couldn't, it just came, as I said, there's no lemon around here. As I said to you, a lemon, or when we say, look at a pink elephant, what do you get? You get a vision of a pink elephant, because what your brain is actually trying to do, it goes into the back of your subconscious and goes, okay, is this lady about to kill me with the words? Can you see how verbal abuse can be? So that's all the body looks about, okay? And what actually happens is that then the body brings that experience that you had with that situation to the fore very quickly. Like that, you either go into fight or flight for a moment, and then they say, oh no, it's only a lemon, okay, because then you realize, okay, you've got the vision or the taste or the experience you had. If it was a good experience, you would then come down and you'd say, okay, well, Janice talking to me about a lemon, I'm actually not going to need to fight, flight, or freeze, okay. Now, with the red t-shirt aspect, the same thing is happening. But as we are just sitting here, we're just talking about a lemon. So you can imagine you going to a shopping mall anywhere, and how many red t-shirts on a daily basis do you see? Okay. So the trigger is happening: fight, flight, come down, fight, flight, come down, fight, flight. So you're pulling in all those hormones on a basically minute by minute. Okay. So this is why the body, you breaking down the body, and that's why we get autoimmune disease, because those hormones haven't got a virus in the body to attack. So they go, well, I've got to do my job, so I've just got to attack the body. Okay. Now, what we do in regression therapy is that we actually look at that situation, the bully, okay, and we then allow your body to actually release that emotion that's attached to that red t-shirt. Now, why we want to do that, because as I said, you eventually in a shopping mall, you're going to go, oh shit, I just got to get out of here. You don't know why. Okay. So you isolate yourself more and more, because the fact is that all this anxiety, all these emotions that you haven't sort of allowed your body to release, it are happening at that time. And this is where we say destinies actually then get changed because of the fact that you go into the best interview with this massive salary you're going to get, and the interviewer or your recent or to be boss, and that's what you're destined to be, okay, is wearing a red t-shirt. You're going to fall apart in that interview and you have no idea why you did come out and say, I've done so many, I don't understand why we've done, like, I don't know what went wrong. That is what we call a trigger. So we cannot take the memory out. That's why we say, be careful what you look and you allow your kids to see and watch and all of that, because the memory cannot be taken away, but the emotional trigger to that memory is what we release. And then you are not triggered by that red t-shirt anymore. I mean, that's a very simple way of explaining it. Okay. But I think that's, the triggers are the hardest, because until you understand where the trigger comes from, you cannot actually repattern a trigger because it's subconsciously running in the body. Okay.
And if you think about like how many triggers we have experienced, how many things in every second of our lives are triggering us or can trigger us. For example, if you go into a crowded place, there must be like 1,000 trigger hitting us. So no wonder everyone's feeling stressed and is always in fight or flight. I think it's really, everyone talks about the nervous system regulation, but I think like the depth of what you're explaining is almost unimaginable to me, what our body does all the time at trying to keep us safe. And then for me, like, you know, I have recently become aware that I was really very anxious all my life, but the baseline has been so high that I've never even recognized all the anxiety, all these triggers. I just felt kind of insecure, and no wonder why. And I think like, if I think about like 1,000 of red t-shirts that I encounter every day, of course we try to isolate ourselves, and of course we try to kind of keep ourselves safe in the way that we can with the control that we think we have. And there are about 1,000 things that I would love to ask you, depending on what you've said just now, but I'm not quite sure if I will remember all of them. One thing that comes to my mind that I really want to double down on is the golden thread that I've seen within your speech right now is the body actually just knows what to do. And it's interesting enough that we are kind of, for whatever reason, preventing this amazing wisdom that the body has to be fully played out. Because if we would pick up our parts the moment that they have been shattered out due to a verbal or a physical or whatever situation that happened, all these things wouldn't be so dramatic. All these triggers wouldn't need to show up that much, or we would heal them much faster. And then of course another thing comes up and then we heal it. But then it's like this, maybe 1 or 2 things at a time, and not like 50 things at a time that are amplified and amplified and amplified until a person kind of needs to shut down because it's just too much. So I think the moment we can come back, each of us, but also collectively, to a point where we stop judging so much and actually let our bodies do what they need to do in that moment, even though it's not making sense, even though it's not a logical decision, even though we have no idea what it does, but we actually hold so much wisdom. That's what I want to come back to. And I wonder where we have left our ability to let that play out, because there's so much healing potential in each and every one of us, and we're definitely not utilizing it, but we're also kind of doing the exact opposite by putting it in a box, or not looking at it, or looking at it just quote unquote from maybe the conscious logical perspective. We are holding all these little things that then grow big in our lives, and then no wonder our society has so many people who need to be on meds or who are deceased. Yeah. I actually know nobody who does not have anything that they're like physically have to deal with. that's like a really big statement, to say like that. Maybe almost all of the population have not healed their stuff, and then they're shutting down and shutting down and shutting down. And I think there is so much potential to kind of reverse that by learning to let our bodies and our subconscious do whatever it needs to do so that we can heal. And like you said, then we try to, we have some depressed people in my family environment, so I'm thinking about them right now when I say like, the moment we say like, get up, come, let's do something, and that person is depressed, and we're not just letting, again, the body do what it needs to do in resting, healing, trying to expand at the capacity that they can, but we're forcing them again to do something that is not in alignment in that moment, because we think we know better what someone else needs than they know for themselves. So I think it's coming back to ourselves and not trying to force over another so much what we think would help them, but rather like, I don't know, even ask them what they need.
When
if
we're
they
in
can.
that position, most people don't know what they need. They
Hmm.
just know they need something. Okay.
Yes,
And
but how?
know,
How to work there then?
now the problem there because the body needs to rest, okay, and you, as you said, you did a session with me, you found that you actually needed to rest. It was actually it was hectic, okay. It felt like you'd run a marathon, okay.
Yeah.
So that's what we're saying. So for someone, most of us who are in that depressive state, yes, we have to, because we can't allow them to get so depressed that they just become even more and more and more and more depressed. We're saying allow the body to heal, okay, but also rest, but also find what allows you to release, that's making and putting, tearing your aura. So that it's a conjunction with that. And most of my clients know that I don't have a problem with drugs from a perspective of, at some point our body may need that, so we can actually work with that person, okay. But not to stay on them, because then the body actually then becomes, you're eliciting the body not to do and give those hormones. We're getting it from an exogenous aspect inside the body. And that's, I think, what most of us have become socially acceptable, to get anything we need from outside there and put it in here. Unfortunately, is that our body understands it can heal itself. It's not a problem. Okay. But when we get to the point where I've looked at everything, I've done anything, so I've just got to get something from there outside. And that's also with drug addicts, okay, and people who have addictive behaviors. The body needs, again, the body's very clever, okay. It states, I need dopamine. That's what I need, because now that's shut off, because I'm in my flight or fight, okay. So I can't get it from my body, so I'm going to source it out there. Okay. So that's why we say don't judge addicts, all right? Because it's the body then going, I need something.
Yeah.
Otherwise, what's going to happen is I'm going to break down even more. Unfortunately, the easiest access to an addiction the client will then use. Okay. So whether it's a sex addiction, whether it's a gambling addiction, it brings in that dopamine. Okay. Because it's that adrenaline rush. And then I've got what I think, and then so it's working, the body's working in tandem with whatever we now require outside our body to actually get what the body needs inside. Okay. So that's why I say, look at your, clients. If they've got addictions, don't look at the addiction. Okay. Look at what they are actually requiring, or the body's trying to get from that addiction. And you'll find, if we're taking drugs, street drugs, it's so that we can zone out of our body. And what's the problem? That is so that we don't feel the emotions in the body, because once your energy and your soul come into the body, you have to feel those emotions, whether it's at a subconscious level or a conscious level. Okay. So you look at the type of addiction people have. And I say to my clients, whether, society says, alcohol and drugs, and that's all bad and whatever, and they frown upon it. All right. But what is that type of addiction is just taking you out of your body so you don't feel. But is it
Mhm.
any worse when you're actually packing your color-coded towels for 24/7 in your home? That's an addiction. Okay. But it's not looked upon by society
Yeah.
as, oh, like whatever. Okay. And yes, people will say on the podcast, but drugs will kill you. Yes, but you're killing yourself and your environment and everything. It doesn't matter what addiction you choose, it's just the level of emotions that you have to actually hold and not feel
Mhm.
in your body is where you're going to actually look for that. Okay. So from that point again, and it's very difficult because if you don't have a safe environment, you become that coping person. And if you've been in an environment that's anxiety level and you've never been taught how to relax, I ask my clients, do you actually know how to relax? And they go, yes, of course I do. Really? Okay. Until
Yeah.
they've gone through the session and we've actually got them to a slight relaxation, then people with you does, I've never felt that before. And we say, yes, because you've never been taught it. So how can you
Mhm.
get there? Someone says to you in a meditation, please relax and breathe. And your brain's going, what's this word? Already you're in anxiety, you're putting the person into anxiety because they can't find that
Mhm.
word that relates to relax. Okay. So again, when I say to my clients, and they say, but I can't meditate and I feel a failure. No, of course not, because
Mhm.
you can't meditate if you've never been learned to or taught how to relax. Okay. And it's that anxiety that you were talking about. It's just the level. And that's what you think is relaxation. But no, what is normal for a body is here to
Yeah.
relax, but you've never been shown how to do that. Okay. So even in meditations, if you're in that fight, flight, or freeze, you'll actually meditate and go out of your body because that's your norm. Okay. And
Mm.
do whatever you want.
Hello.
All right. But there's also two meditations, okay, where you actually come into your body and you won't do
Yeah.
those meditations, okay, or you
Yeah.
will feel like I've got to move all the time in my because you're starting to feel those emotions.
Mhm.
So again, it's about making people aware that if you're not taught something, how do you do it? And I think that's what needs to be brought into schools and teach our little ones. That's why we have so much ADHD and ADD, because their body knows they have to move in order
Mhm.
to align that the spinal energy in order to actually open up the logical brain and the emotional brain. Because what happens when we in fight or flight, our logical brain shuts down. We all know that. Okay.
Yeah.
Whatever experience, depending on the situation, people can lift cars when you're going to fight or flight. Okay. And then they go, how did I do that? Okay.
Mhm.
Because what a logical aspect, your logical brain shuts down. And we see that on an MRI, and your emotional brain actually lights up. So, and there's only three things then you do: fight, flight, freeze. That's all the brain thinks about. Okay. So if we can balance you and show you, okay, this is when you go into fight or flight, then you can when that trigger is taken away, you actually can stand in the situation and feels like you're standing outside the situation because you've got your logical and your emotional brain now functioning balanced. Okay.
Yeah.
You can go, okay, so I'm now feeling fear, but this is what I logically do about it. And that's where, because you can't change the world is the world. Situations are going to happen every day, every minute, every whatever. But we can change how you react to that by taking the triggers away
Mhm.
that was set up in your youth.
And
Okay.
also like the mirror that you talked about before, I think like the aspect of everything as a reflection of us is quite widely known, at least in the bubble that I'm living in. But still, like the aspect of why that is, I think it's often only a surface understanding of this is the frequency that I hold somewhere. So this is shown to me. I attract this, however you want to phrase it, so that I can actually become aware of it and then heal that part again. So I think
Yes.
actually our bodies again are telling us with everything that comes into our whole experience, telling us what is there to be looked at. So it's actually really very beautiful if you, without judgment, look at your life or another one's life, to see like, okay, that's what I see in there. That what comes up. That's what wants to be looked at. That what wants to be healed. So there's so many options to integrate these parts, to like heal
Absolutely.
ourselves. It's really beautiful the moment we, or like you said with the meditation, the moment we don't do the meditation because we can't even relax enough, that's a sign in itself. So there are so many signs the moment we want to look at them, and the moment we have the awareness and the knowledge to interpret it in a way that it actually makes sense for us. So I think that is something that is really necessary for all of us to become more aware of, without judging where we are right now, but just to take it as information, as neutral information. See like, oh well, okay, I all the time have the fear that someone's dying in a car accident. Maybe there is a little bit of relaxation. Maybe it's good for me, to work with that and to like interpret it not as, how can you? It's not logical. Just calm down or whatever, but to actually take it in as information to work with, the way a teacher gives you maybe something that you need to do, and you do it because it's had been handed to you. So I think in the moment we do take the information that we get all the time, there is so much potential for healing, and that is such a good news, I think, because as I said, most people I know do actually need a lot of healing in their lives, and the option to do so is always there.
I think what has happened is that there weren't a lot of options to heal. Okay, it was either frowned upon or not. Okay, and also from the perspective of that, a lot of people don't have the means to actually heal. Okay, if you look at 90% of the population, they are under the low wage aspect.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're asking people to go that way, but they don't have the means to. Okay, so then it's what we call the familial sort of aspect in a family, where the trauma then becomes on trauma, and then their kids become the trauma bearers, who then become the trauma bearers. And that's where we call it the generational trauma in families. So this type of stuff should be taught in schools. Okay, it should be sort of for everyone to actually be able to access it, because then the way the world actually works won't be at an aggressive level. Okay,
Yeah.
it'll flow more. It'll be you'll find that you actually then walk into things where you should be easier. Financial aspects will be better, because sacrals and that parts of the body won't be shut down. Okay.
Yeah.
And as I say, the sacral area, which is the area just below the belly button, is immensely powerful to manifest. So if you have no self-worth, you can work 24/7. You can get millions of dollars or rand, or however you speak, in whatever monetary aspect you're in, but you'll find you'll lose it very quickly. So again, it's about that aspect of healing those parts of our body which can actually make life easier for you.
Yeah.
And that's what we're looking towards more. And from the point of view of, if we can decrease the triggers, you become more relaxed. The situation can be happening, okay, but you are balanced emotionally and in your masculine and feminine, so you're not becoming that reactive person, which then just escalates aspects. Okay, you could step back and go, okay, I see what's happening here. And once you don't react exactly like that tennis ball, it just drops. Okay, that other person can be doing their own thing and shouting, screaming, and doing whatever, but as soon as you don't react, they cannot use that energy to vibrate where they want to always go. Okay. Yes, sometimes it can make them really angry, because they want that energy in order to vibrate at that emotion. Okay. But then again, you can, in your logical brain, you can be in that space where, okay, I can just turn around now, and when that person's calmed down, I'll just move off. Okay.
Yeah.
So things actually the rest of the world and the rest of the business areas, and that will actually then start to calm down, okay, rather than vibrating at this aspect of fight, flight, or fear all the time.
Which is so beautiful, because there's a wonderful visual to how much our own change can impact the collective. And I know, like, from a personal standpoint, I often felt so small and like, what can I do? Regards to any collective problem, it's just me. But then again, it's not, because this ripples out. And I think it's a wonderful way to look at it, to see like, okay, I'm just not taking part in this game, quote unquote, anymore. And yes, the other person is totally allowed to feel whatever they need to feel to process, but I'm not jumping on that train. And I, for myself, have hopefully then learned to stay more in alignment with me, and to kind of not even protect myself in a like defensive mechanism, but to like really stay centered within me, and therefore I don't have to drop that ball. So the other one does need to kind of find another way for their situation. And that is, if I just think, because we've talked about war briefly before, and I'm living in Germany, so there's a lot of like war background still, very, very much. And when I think of how much the generation of my grandparents who have been in war, and the stories that I have been told and that my mother has been told, and the way that we have related to, okay, well, that's not a bad situation. Look at your grandfather. He was suffering in war. You know, that kind of like taking things into relation that happen, if that would stop, and we can, most of my listeners are female and most of them are mothers, so if your kids don't need to pick up that energy field, but can learn another way to process, another way to live life, another way to kind of respond rather than react to things that happen, I think that the world can shift like tremendously, just quote unquote by the little ones observing that we as parents might act differently than what we have seen in our caretakers. And not with blame, but just because we heal collectively, we can kind of give a more healthy role model, at least sometimes, because nobody's perfect, but we can like give another way, another opportunity to the next generation on how to deal with things, and how to like actually be in relationship with our own body and the wisdom that we hold.
I think you sort of hit a bit of a spot there on, you know, as I said to you before, we can't be perfect. Okay, there is nothing, not even a plant or a rock or any, there is nothing that is perfect. I think they should actually take that out of the dictionary. But anyway,
the word.
all right, because it's what you perceive as perfect doesn't mean what I perceive as perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. And who's taught you that perception of perfect? Their perception might not have been perfect. Okay, that's why I say there is no perfect. What we've got to try and do, and we've all, you know, as I say, we come into this world to learn emotions. So to say that there are never going to be emotions or situations, then you're living on la la land. Okay, right. So what we've got to do with our kids, and what we weren't taught, is to actually how to deal with them on a daily basis, so they don't get backed up on in Pandora's box. Okay, and then it's not such a traumatic, it doesn't lie in our energy field at such a heavy frequency, which then ripples out to the rest of the world, because we're all connected. Okay. So the aspect of giving the tools to the kids that we never had, okay, because that would then lessen the trauma in the families, because me, you, everyone, my granny, my grandfather, they all had trauma, but they didn't know how to handle it, which then we passed on to our kids. Okay. And that's what we should be giving our kids, is the tools for daily basis in order to remove and those emotions that are coming at us, which allows you to stay in that very balanced state. And you can actually then not have so many triggers that will change your destiny, not have so many aspects that will in your aura that will destroy your physical body and make it become diseased. All right. So to say, oh no, well, you know what, trauma is never going to happen. As I said to you, no, it is always, it is the world. Okay.
Yes.
We live in a community where there is, but what we have to do is teach people that what emotions are, and then how to safely release them so that it doesn't affect anyone else.
And then as a byproduct, we also have much more fun in our lives because we can experience joy much more deeply, because there's not only the fight or flight. So I think that's a very nice like side outlook. And then we have the moment we learn to feel safe again in who we are and how we act or react or respond to certain situations. So it's actually a wonderful like upward spiral the moment there is this healing and this integration happening.
And I think what happens then is that you become your authentic self. Okay. You don't react from aspects that affected you. Okay. And that were done to you. You then peel that layer off and you become that soul that first came in here, that personality that first came in here. Because remember, our personalities, okay, are carved on the families that we actually then come into as children. So we don't even know who we are until we start actually taking these layers off. And that's why a lot of people say, I feel lost. Okay. Because as I said, your brain is so sponge like when you're a child. That is when you take in so much information. And that's where your personality is formed. But we actually want the soul, the conscious higher mind, to actually then acknowledge who it was when it came in here, not what was done to us and we became. Once you heal that, what happens is the personality and the higher mind actually come together, and your authentic self then actually is born through that.
That's so beautiful. That is such a beautiful outlook, isn't it?
It is. And you know, when you say you've gone through those shadow moments and you get to that, you until you've experienced it, you can't actually explain it. It's just, you know, you're standing in your power and your authenticity. And yes, you're going to have bad days, you know, but you know who you are. They don't completely allow you to crumble because of the fact that you know who you actually are, not working on emotions that are in the body at that time, or, you know, way back when.
Yeah.
Okay.
My goodness. That is so deep. That I think we need to process this. And I thank you so much for a lot of what you talked to me about today. You've said during your session, and it was kind of a bit sad because afterwards I thought like, my God, I have forgotten stuff. It was so important, but I can't remember. And now I have the gift to have everything on recording so I can re-listen, which is a very wonderful side effect of this. And also I'm deeply grateful that you've shared so much of your knowledge, because, you know, I've done a lot of stuff in the last 15 years to kind of get back to myself, but I've never experienced something so profound in such a short period of time. And I cannot state how important this has been for me in the last weeks, but also how important I think this is for everyone who's listening, because there's actually so much that we can do. And I love the way that we can work with everything that happened in this life and to bring back the conscious and the body and the subconscious to kind of like play together again. It's kind of like a merging of things that should, quote unquote, be together back again. And so I hope everyone is getting as much out of this as I did. And I'm sad that that it's over an hour and I have to end, because there are so many more questions that I would like to ask you. But this has been an immense pleasure to me. I thank you so much for your time.
And I thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. And I just fills my soul when I can actually help other people.
Yeah.
Just even if it's a little bit of knowledge. So thank you very much for having me on your show. It's been an absolute pleasure. And,
For me too.
and it's been a very, very soulful meeting. So I really do appreciate everything that you have done to get on the podcast.
Thank you so much. Can you give me as a last information, where can people reach you if they want to learn more or connect with you and, feel called to book a session? Is Instagram the best place, or how can they best connect with you?
They can go to my website, which is
Okay.
www.janetenergyhealing.com. Okay. Or they can get me on Instagram. A bit slow on Instagram, as you know.
all fine. There's no rush.
WhatsApp, anything like that, or they can just email me at janet@schoolofregressiontherapy.com. So they're more than welcome to any of those aspects. And I say, not the best Instagram person ever, but I will find you and definitely get back to you as soon as possible when I get any of the messages that come through.
Wonderful. I'll link everything in the caption so that people can reach you. And as I said, I hope that we come out of an area where we have to respond immediately. So I don't ever, I'm as slow as you are in responding to messages, but that has nothing to do with the depth of the connection, which is the most important thing. So I thank you very much for that.
Thanks. And I really appreciate everything you